The second round of peace talks on the Syrian conflict are being held in Vienna this weekend. It'll be a big talk fest. Around 20 countries are coming together to map out a plan of action to end Syria's civil war, which has been going on for years and years and years and years and years. Otago University international relations expert Robert Patman joins me now. Robert, good to have you on the show again.
Good morning, Paul.
After years and years of this bitter conflict and so many displaced and killed people, what is the current situation on the ground in Syria?
Well, it has changed a bit since the Russian intervention at the end of September, Paul. They've launched a series of airstrikes against opposition forces to Assad, including the Islamic State. And we've learnt in the last 24 hours that the Americans are coordinating an offensive in western Iraq against Islamic State positions. The Americans are coordinating with the Peshmerga Kurdish fighters, about 7,500. They're making good progress around Sinjar and hope to capture it from the Islamic State forces.
But they are more or less baby steps still, aren't they? After years and years of people saying, well, Assad is going to run out of money, he's going to run out of support. That hasn't happened. Now, of course, Russia, as you say, Russia have become involved in a way that they hadn't been up until recently. Should we be optimistic that this gathering of up to 20 countries over the weekend in Vienna are going to be able to find any resolve to this?
Well, I think we should be encouraged by the fact they are going for a second round of talks. I think John Kerry, the American Secretary of State, has been encouraged by the example of talks with Iran, which were multilateral talks involving Russia, China and the United States, amongst others. And people said they would never get anywhere, and they did eventually produce a solution. The big two sticking points, Paul, are recognition of who are the legitimate opposition forces to Assad and what to do with Assad. The Russians and the Iranians want to keep Assad in place. The Americans and much of the Western world, including the Europeans, the European Union, and Saudi Arabia and other actors in the Middle East want Assad to go. So that's a bit of a sticking point.
Is there any indication, do you think, that the Russians are slightly softening their stance, perhaps as a dual result of both the fact that they are economically bereft and also the fact that they have now become the target of terrorism themselves?
I think there is a slight difference between the Russian attitude towards Assad since their involvement, their intensified airstrikes. They're beginning to realise, well, I think they knew already, but I think they hoped their airstrikes would achieve more spectacular results on the ground than they have. The Syrian army, although it's just recently got a victory against the Islamic State around Aleppo, hasn't really capitalised on the airstrikes as I think the Russians had hoped. And I think they realise they've got themselves into a quagmire. They may be looking for a solution whereby looking beyond Assad. But at the moment, they are publicly saying they're sticking with him.
Still supporting Assad.
The situation is changing.
Yeah, and just very, very quickly, Robert, some people could be forgiven for thinking that this is Syrian regime against IS, but there are a lot of factors at play on the ground, aren't there?
Absolutely, Paul. I think that point really needs to be emphasised. The majority of Syrians do not want their future with Assad or Islamic State.
And that therein lies just a thorny bush. Robert, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great weekend. Robert Patman, Otago University international relations expert.